Hey guys, thanks for joining me for an episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Destiny Aurora Renegades. This is the first game by Destiny Horizons. It is a 1 to 4 player game that takes roughly 2 to 3 hours to play, depending upon the scenario you've chosen. And it is a competitive game, so each of the other players is working against the other players to accomplish their objectives first. Unless you're playing a 4-player game, in which then you can split into 2 teams, where 2 players control one faction and 2 players control the other, and the team that is able to accomplish their objectives first then would be the overall winners. So in the game, there are 2 factions currently in the core box. You have the Coalition and the Renegades. The players will choose the faction that they wish to play, the ship that they wish to pilot, and then their crew that they're going to pilot that ship with. And then you're going to choose your scenario. You have a couple of options. You can either play a single mission, where the players are just going through and going to try to accomplish those goals, and then it'll be over once they accomplish those and the game is over. Or you can choose to play a campaign where you have an overall story arc that the players will work their way through and be able to upgrade their crew, improve their ship, do all kinds of different things in between the games as well to improve all their different stuff. You can capture other crew members and try to turn them to your side. All these really neat things. So the campaign offers a lot more depth, and then once you get to the final mission, you have a big nasty boss you have to fight and all kinds of things. And in certain scenarios within that, you may even end up working with the other team to accomplish some of those goals initially. So it's some really interesting dynamics within the campaign if that's something that you're looking for. So first off, I definitely feel like either way you choose, whether it's a scenario or campaign, you're going to get a solid game out of this. The one thing that I would suggest, though, is if you have a chance, definitely try to play the campaign, because it really does open up a lot of the meat and potatoes that this game has to offer. There's a lot of depth to the game. There's a lot of things that you can do that you really can't do in a single mission. You're not really going to do boarding attacks. You're not going to really capture other enemy crew members and stuff like that. It's just, you don't have enough time to accomplish all that within the parameters of the mission most of the time. You can try, but it definitely isn't really designed for a single mission. It's more of a campaign. So other than that, let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you guys how to play. The first part of setup is to choose a ship. The game itself comes with 4 starting ships, 2 for each faction, which are the Renegades and the Coalition factions. Each of the ships is exactly the same with its stats and its starting abilities, so at the beginning of the game, go ahead and just choose one of the ships that you think looks cool. Each ship has 5 different stations for the crew members to be placed. It has a medbay for healing crew members and a brig for holding enemy crew members. Each ship has 5 special abilities, which as a crew member that is in that station can take that test, and if passed, they will be able to resolve that special ability. Each ship has upgrade slots, which they can equip different cards to upgrade those different slots. Then we have the ship's stats down here, which is the capacity, the number of crew members that can be in this ship at any time, the range of its attacks, the number of shields it has, and any special bonuses that it grants crew members for these different abilities. Then we have the ship's name and class, which right now classes don't really have any effect on the ships. And when a ship takes enough damage to deplete its shields completely, you're going to flip the ship's card over, and it will show you different things. The abilities have changed. It doesn't grant any additional bonuses anymore, and a ship can actually start taking damage at that point. The next step in setup is to choose your crew. In the core sets, each of the 2 different factions will have a total of 10 characters to choose from, and you're going to go ahead and select 5 characters from that to fill the 5 different stations of your ship. So let's go look at a breakdown of the character card. We have the character's name at the top. Underneath that is going to be keywords that will affect that character, and then the character's specialty. For example, with the Coalition players, the Inspector is going to be the commander, and in the Renegade faction, it's going to be the captain that will be the commander. Then we have the initiative value for that crew member, their faction. Going down one side of the card is their different stats for health, speed, defense, and attack. And going down the other side is going to be their stats for their different abilities, which is the leadership, search, tech or engineering, stealth, and finally medical. Then underneath that is going to list the side of the card. So this is the planet surface side and any special abilities that character has. Now on the opposite side of the card will be the orbit abilities for that character when they're in space. You'll notice that their stat lines have changed and some of their abilities have changed as well. So again, we have leadership, search, tech, targeting, and finally piloting. Moving back over to our ship, we're going to go ahead and place our crew members in their different stations now. So we have our inspector / commander, communications, engineering, weapons, and navigation / pilot. We can also grab our miniature for our ship, and then we can fill our armory with our starting weapons. So we get 3 arc pistols, we get an arc blade, and an emergency teleport device. An optional step in setup is to choose a bounty. Now this is more for campaign play or if you just want to add another level to your game, but this is an optional thing. In order to do this is once the players have selected their crew, they'll grab 1 card for each crew member that isn't part of that crew. They'll go ahead and mix them up, and then each player will draw from the other player's bounties. The player will keep that bounty secret, and if they're able to kill that character during the game, then they'll receive a special bonus of credits at the end of the game. Now that we've completed player setup, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of setup. So next we're going to choose the mission that we're going to go on, or if we're going to play a campaign. At the top of each mission card is going to be the campaign that mission is associated with if you're playing a campaign, and then you have the mission's name, any backstory that is part of that mission, any special setup instructions, and then the mission parameters themselves, what you're going after. At the bottom of the card, it also lists the amount of digits that this mission is worth at the end, and the planet that this mission is going to take place on. Now, you're also going to want to reference the missions book. As you guys can see here, it's going to outline a lot of the same things, but go into more detail and more specifics about the mission and any setup instructions you have. It is also going to list the outcomes for that mission at the end, or if time runs out, and for the different factions and what happens if neither one of them accomplish the mission goals. Then you have to choose the length of your game. Normal games, you're just going to shuffle the world event deck up, and if the deck runs out, then the game will end. But you can also play a timed game where you're going to decrease the amount of mission or world event cards to 6 to 8 cards or whatever length you want. These cards are going to have different effects, both for orbital and planet side effects, and a lot of them will be massive changes to the game and can do some major changes. So some of them will introduce new enemies into the game, or some of them will actually have no effects at all. Let's go ahead and set the rest of the decks we're going to use for the game. So these first 2 decks you're not going to need to shuffle. They are the salvage deck and the search items deck. These 2 decks are going to correspond to tokens that are going to go out on the field, which will be randomized, which we're going to cover during setup. But these decks will not need to be shuffled, and you can alphabetize them if you'd like, just to make things easier for you. Then we have the creature deck. You can go ahead and shuffle that one up. And each of the creatures itself is going to have the same stats as our characters for the most part, except for on this side here, obviously, because they're not going to be piloting ships. And they'll have special abilities and their different stats on the side. The final deck is the enemies deck, and that deck you're going to want to check your mission parameters and see if there's any things that you have to take out of that deck. For example, with our mission, Abduct the Princess, we're going to go ahead and remove any Zarathi cards from the enemy deck. From there, then we're going to go ahead and shuffle up that deck and place it off to the side as well. Moving over to actually setting up the 2 different boards that we're going to be using in this game, you have a couple of different options. The rulebook says that you simply shuffle up the different decks, which is the orbital location and planetary location decks individually, and then draw cards until you've populated an entire board, which would be 1 centerpiece, 4 side pieces, and 4 corner pieces. Alternatively, you can go ahead and separate the deck into the 3 different ones that you need, or you can simply shuffle up each of the different piles and generate your deck that way. If you're choosing the last option, make sure that you select the cards out of the different decks that you're using as well, as those will be used later on to randomize different locations. So the way I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the different cards into 3 different decks. We have our side decks, our corner deck, and our center deck. Now you're also going to want to reference the mission, as some missions will require you to have certain pieces. So let's go ahead and start with our center. We have the nebula, and each tile is also going to list the name of that tile in the corner. Then we're going to go ahead and do our sides next. So let's do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for our sides, we're going to need clear space 1, asteroid belt, debris, and comet storm. So we have asteroid belt. And these don't really click in super well. You might have to trim some of these to get them in. Sometimes you can lay them down opposite directions. And finally, last are our corner pieces. So for our corners, we're going to be using the solar fragments, derelict ship, wormhole, and satellites. And then you're also going to want to attach the 4 different planets to the different sides. The last step at this point is to go ahead and draw all these salvage pieces that you have, all those salvage tokens. You can place them in a bag, a hat, or anything you want. Mix them up and then go ahead and draw 9 of them out of there. Keep the reverse side hidden. And then for the orbital spaces, you're going to place these out in the center of each of the tiles, but they have to be at least 4 spaces away from each planet, and you can't place them in any impassable terrain pieces. So we'll go ahead and place one there, one over here. Moving over to the planetary side setup, for this mission we have the center tile already, which is the cave. Then we're going to go ahead and select our sides. So we're going to have the alien tomb, aquarium, armory, and underground temple. So we'll go ahead and pull those. And then finally we'll do our corners. We'll go ahead and put our 4 end caps on there. And then again, we'll go ahead and take our full stacks. This is only a selection of them, but our full stacks of planetary items, mix them up. You can do it again in a bag, a hat, whatever you have, and then draw out 9 of them. With the planetary ones, there are going to be ghost spaces that will show a little silhouette of them, and that is where you're going to place those particular items. All the cards used for the planetary locations, again, you can go ahead and shuffle those up, as they will be randomized location cards for different effects that will spawn on the planetary side. The last step in setup before we start the game is, again, you're going to reference your mission card and see if there are any other specific setup instructions. So with this one, abduct the princess. She's going to go ahead and be placed in the cave. It doesn't really matter on her location, so we'll put her over here. And then it says that we're going to draw a random creature, and that will be placed at the cave entrance guarding it. So we have the Iron Dragon. So he'll be placed at the cave entrance, and our heroes will have to either sneak past him or defeat him in order to get to the princess. Now we're also going to place the troop transport on the Port Sevlin on the space map. So we'll do that when we get to there, and you guys will see that. And at this point, we're ready to move into the game. Destiny Aurora Renegade is played over a number of rounds, either until all the world event cards are drawn or a mission has been completed. Each round is broken into 3 phases, which are the ship orbital phase, the planet surface phase, and the world event phase. Players are going to take their turns in order based on their initiative, starting with the highest initiative first and proceeding down. If players are tied, the Renegade player will always take their turn first, followed by the Coalition players, and finally the NPC characters. Each round will begin with the ship orbital phase. Players' ships are going to take their turns in order of initiative, and their initiative is going to be first based on their commander. If their commander is not present, then you can use your navigator, and if neither are present, then your ship is considered to have an initiative value of 0 and will be the last to go even after NPC ships. During a ship's turn, it can perform 2 actions and any number of free actions. Let's go ahead and take a look at all the different actions we can perform now. So first off, before we do that, let's determine who's going to go first this turn. So we're going to take a look at the initiative values for both of our commanders. They're both 8, so our Renegade player will be the first one to go this turn, perform his 2 actions. So the first action we can choose from is a movement action. Ship movement is based on the wing value of the crew member presently in the navigation station, which is our pilot currently. His wing value is a 4, and as long as your ship's shields are still active, you will automatically get a +1 to that movement, which our ship is at full shields still, so our ship will have a movement of 5 this turn. Each movement point spent allows a ship to either move 1 space in the direction they are facing, which can be straight or diagonal, or they can rotate up to 180 degrees. Then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the terrain. There's 2 different features on the space map. We have the green sections, which are going to be hindering terrain, and are going to require 2 movement points to move through each space until you move out of them again. And then we have blocking terrain, which are the red bordered areas. This terrain is impassable. It cannot be moved through. You must move around it. You can move through other ships, though, without having to make any tests. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. We're going to go ahead and move our ship, and we're going to go ahead and start by moving here. That's 1 space. Then we're going to move a second space, so we have 3 points left. We can choose to turn up to 180 degrees for 1 point, so that's our 3rd movement point. We'll move here for 4, and then we're going to go ahead and rotate again for our 5th point. At this point, then we can choose to do another movement action. We can choose to do any action multiple times except for the attack action. Another action we can perform is an attack action. A ship can attack an opposing ship if it is within range. Ships can only fire in straight or diagonal lines from their front space, and the spaces to that space is left and right. So with our ship here, we can fire out of its front space, and the spaces to its left and right. So you basically have these front 3 spaces it can fire from. Line of sight is drawn from one corner of the attacker's square to the middle of the target's square. And as long as that line doesn't pass through blocking terrain, they will have line of sight to their target. A ship can only attack if it has a crew member occupying the weapons station. And a ship can only perform 1 attack per round unless a bonus or upgrade states otherwise. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example of an attack now. So we have our coalition ship here who's going to fire on our renegade ship. So first off, we're going to check to make sure we have line of sight, which we do. We're not going through any blocking terrain. Then we're going to determine if we have range to it, which our coalition ship has a range of 6. So we're going to count the spaces in front of us up to the target space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are just in range of our ship, and it is within our 3 front spaces, as you guys can see in this diagram. Then we're going to check our crew members for any special abilities. So Quinn is going to grant us +1 to one of the attack dice that we roll, and we're going to check his attack value, his targeting value. For him, it's a 4, as you guys can see. And the ship, since it still has its shields, is going to grant 1 additional dice. So he is going to roll 5 dice. And we're looking for 4s or better for successful attacks. And like I said, he can add +1 to one of those dice rolls. So we did very well. We have 2 4s, 2 5s, and a 3. If we had a 6, we could add that +1 bonus to the 6, which would make it a penetrating hit, which means that the defender cannot stop that. But instead, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to this dice. That way, then all 5 of our dice are successful hits. So at this point, the defender is going to roll a number of defensive dice based on how many attacks were successful on him. So our defender is going to roll 5 defensive dice. And since our attacker shot through the difficult terrain here, the defender is going to get to roll up to 2 of those dice. And the pilot is also going to grant +1 to one of the dice, the defensive dice rolled. Oof, we did really bad. So we're going to add +1 to one of these dice. So we're going to bump it up to a 4, and then we get to re-roll 2 of these dice. All right, so a little bit of help there. From here, then we're going to compare the dice and cancel out some of them. So we add these values here. So this is going to cancel out, and that will cancel out. At that point, we have 3 successful hits that have gone through, and so we will take 3 damage on our shields for that ship. When you are adjacent to or on a salvage token, you can choose to try to salvage that token. You can also perform a free scan test to check and see what that token is before you choose to spend an action to salvage it. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. Let's go ahead and say that our ship is adjacent to our salvage, and then we're going to go ahead and do a test. So our communications officer, we're going to check to see what her eye icon is, which is a 3, so she'll get to roll 3 dice. And she's looking for a 5 or better on one of those dice. So she definitely has it. So we're going to get to take a look at this token, which is a value. We get 100 credits or digits. So we're going to go ahead and spend the action to acquire that. Now, even if you cannot scan, you can still collect a salvage, but will suffer any ill effects if it happens to be a trap. The next action is to board an enemy ship. Now, this action normally is not going to be used unless you're playing a longer game or a campaign. In order to do this, a ship's shields must have fallen and the ship's card must be turned over, which will now make it vulnerable to boarding. The ships must be adjacent to each other, and the ship that wishes to perform a boarding action must pass a 5+ tech test with their engineering station. From there, then they can send over any crew members they wish, as long as at least one stays behind on their own ship. Any crew members that stay behind, that are in their stations, can only perform those actions that they have crew members in stations of. And ships can still perform attack actions against adjacent ships with their guns as long as they have a person in their weapons station. More on this is in the book, so I would reference that as you guys come up to it. But like I said, this is an action that normally isn't taken very often. A ship can also choose to take an action to descend to the planet's surface. When they do this, their landing party may immediately perform a free action to disembark from the ship using half of their speed value. This is called deployment. Even if a player has any extra actions remaining after deployment is complete, the player's orbit phase ends immediately. And a landing party will consist of up to a maximum of 3 party members from the crew on that ship. A player can also spend an action to attempt to turn a prisoner. This is only going to be done in campaign play, and it does have some benefits, but it does take quite a while to do it. So I'm not going to really cover all the details of it in this. Basically, you have to heal partially or fully heal a prisoner that you've captured already, and then you're going to take a leadership test against your opponent that controls that crew member. If you happen to roll higher, then you have turned the prisoner. Otherwise, it stays loyal to the other player. A player can also choose to perform some or all of these free actions, which are to move crew members between stations, which can only be done at the beginning of the ship's turn. We've already taken a look at how players can scan salvage tokens, and a player can also perform one of the ship's abilities once per round. So let's go and take a look at another example of the Coalition's turn. So we're going to move him. The pilot has a movement of 5 plus the ship gives him +1. So 1, 2, 3, 4. She gets to do 1 free rotation. 5, 6. And then we're going to go ahead and do a scan real quick. So again, our communications is 4. So we need a 5 or 6 come up on one of these dice. We got it. So we get to check to see what this salvage token is. All right, it is a improved nav. So we're going to go ahead and collect that as our second action. So we're going to go ahead and grab that card out of the salvage deck, as you guys can see here. After all Renegade and Coalition ships have performed their actions, assuming their initiatives are greater than 0, which only happens if there's no commander and navigator attached to the ship, then the non-player ships are going to take their actions. So in this mission, we have the transport that's going to get to activate. NPC ships get to perform 2 actions as well. NPC ships can only move and attack. So the troop transport has a couple of conditions. First off, the troop transport will roll 1 attack per round against all targets within range after moving. And for movement, it says if moving from one side of the board to the other increases movement to 6, ignoring hindering effects, If there are no ships in range after moving, it will move 3 more spaces. So it is not moving across the board, it is moving over here, so it will not benefit from that first effect for movement. So its movement value is 3, so it's going to go ahead and move 3 spaces. So we're going to move 1, 2, 3, and it is going to be within range of our one ship here, as its range is 5, and it's going to go ahead and perform an attack against it. So as you guys can see here, it's going to have an attack of 4, so it's going to roll 4 dice. Alright, the attack went pretty bad. It only rolled 1 successful hit. So our defender will roll 1. And he stops the damage. So we don't take any damage from the transport. And at this point, there are no other ships on the field. So the orbital phase will come to an end. And we're ready to move into the planetary phase. One last thing to note is that in normal games where you're going to be playing through the whole game, when you're done with your orbiting phase and you move into the planetary phase, if nobody is at the planet yet, then you can just simply skip that phase and move right into the world event phase. You'll continue going through your rounds until one of your ships reaches the planet, and at that point, then you will actually do the planetary phase. So we're going to go ahead and just jump ahead. I'm going to say that the ships have made it to the planet, and we're going to move into that phase so you guys can see how that phase works and all the different actions you can do during that. So the first thing we need to do before actually getting into the planetary phase is let's go ahead and say that one of our ships had descended during the orbital phase. So we're going to go ahead and give it to the Renegade players. At this point, they would choose one of the different ports to drop their ship at. So we're going to choose our first port there. And then they get to do a free deployment. So they're going to go ahead and create their landing party, which can be up to 3 members from their crew. So let's go ahead and take a look at these guys. We're going to go ahead and go with our captain. We will choose our engineer and our weapons specialist. The other crew members will stay on the ship, so we'll just toss their cards up there. And now remember to flip your cards over to the planetary surface side, and then finally you're going to be able to equip your members with any of the weapons you have in your armory. So we'll go ahead and give each one of our characters a arc pistol, and we'll go ahead and give the commander the arc blade, and our weapon specialist the emergency teleport device. Now the other player again would do the same thing during their turn. From here, then, you would get to do a free deployment from there using half of your movement value. So each of our crew members' movement is 4, so we will each get 2 movement points to move. So we'll go ahead and do our commander first. She's going to go ahead and go here, 1, 2, so she'll be on the top of the ladder. We'll follow suit with our engineer and then our last person there. Now, during movement, we'll cover the different effects of that in a minute. So a couple of important things to cover real quick before we move into the player's actions. First off, on the planet's surface, the players are going to again be able to activate their parties based on initiative order. In order to determine this, you're going to add up all 3 of the initiative values for your party, and that will be the party's total initiative. So, for example, with our Renegades, we have an 8, a 6 for 14, and 3 more for 17, compared to our other side, who has 16. So again, our Renegade player will be the first one to activate their crew during this turn. And when their crew activates, each of the characters will get to perform 2 actions, and any free actions that they would like to do during their turn. Other than this, the other important thing is to deal with your ship. So leaving ships docked on a mission planet can have some very negative effects. First off, a ship that is docked at the planet can be targeted by any ship that is in orbit that is within 2 spaces or range of 2 of that planet. The ship will not be able to fire back, but can defend against that attack. It also is going to become the highest priority on the planets for NPC characters unless they're in range of other characters, in which case then they'll attack them. And the ship can be boarded by enemy crew members if it is left on the planet. So it is usually recommended that you don't leave your ship on the planet. You want to ascend as soon as you can and just kind of orbit around or move around in space with your ship. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at all the different actions the players can perform during their turn. So the first one we're going to take a look at is movement, which is based on the crew member's speed value and can move in any direction. They can move through friendly crew members, but they cannot move through enemy crew members, creatures, or villains unless they have the flight ability or they successfully perform an evade test. In order to perform an evade test, when adjacent to an enemy, you will make a 5+ stealth test. If successful, you can continue moving, and if you fail, then you must stop and you lose any remaining movement that you have. You can perform another action if you still have one. Other than that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different terrain features. So just like in space, the green spaces are going to cause you to spend 1 additional movement point for each space you're in them, or when you're in them. And the red spaces, again, are impassable. You cannot move in them by any means. The new ones are the blue spaces, which are water spaces. And again, they're basically considered just like the green spaces. When you move into them, it's going to cost you 2 movement points to move through them until you're out of them again. The next one we're going to look at are the elevated positions, which are your yellow spaces. These spaces are going to be considered elevated and can only be accessed by bridges, steps, or ladders, or if you have the flight ability. Now, sometimes on the yellow spaces, as you guys can see here in this picture, they're going to have arrows which are showing the elevation. So those areas you can actually move up onto elevated areas. Otherwise, for example, with this one, you must use a ladder or you must have the flight ability in order to get up there. Then we have the orange spaces, which are going to be sunken spaces. These work the same way as elevated spaces, except for that you'll use ladders to get down them. You can choose to jump down them, but then you're going to take one unavoidable damage to your character. And if you have the flight ability, again, you can use that as well. Combat on the planet works pretty much the same way as it does in space. So let's look at another example of this with some of the other conditions. So first off, with sunken spaces and elevated spaces, if a character wishes to target another character in a sunken space, they must be on one of the edges. And the same is true with a character that is in the sunken space. They must only be able to target a character that is on one of the edges of that space. So if our character was up here, our characters in there could not target him. From here, then, again, we can either do ranged or melee combat. So if we're adjacent to another character, we can perform a melee combat. Otherwise, with ranged combats, the weapon is going to tell you the range that it is. So like the arc pistols have a range of 4. And you also want to check your weapons for any special things, like the arc blade does grant you +1 to one of the dice rolls. So from there, let's go ahead and perform an attack again. So we have our captain here who's going to perform a melee attack against our other commander over there. So she is going to receive 5 dice for her attack. And again, she's looking for 4 5s and 6s. Well, that's pretty good. All right. And then she does get to modify one of those with the arc blade by 1. And she can add +1 to one of the rolled attack dice with her precise strike or precision strike. So she has 5 successes. And again, then our other character will get to roll his defense. So he didn't do as well. So he's got 2 here. And he doesn't have any defense. So he is going to take 3 points of damage. So we'll go ahead and give him 3 points of damage, or 3 wound markers on his character. If one of your crew members is next to an item, they can perform an interact action. So let's look at an example of this. Let's go ahead and say that our character here, it's her turn. She's going to go ahead and move into this space here. And then she's going to go ahead and do a free scan. So again, she would have to roll the dice to see if she can get a 5+. She does, so she gets to take a peek. It is a neural dampening rifle, so that's a pretty good weapon, I think. So she's going to go ahead and spend the action to pick it up. So at this point, then she's going to collect the rifle, as you guys can see, and it has 4 energy tokens on it to start. And most of the time with weapons, when you fire them and they have energy tokens, you'll have to expend 1 energy token in order to fire it. With the neuro-dampening rifle, it's going to remove an energy token each time this weapon does 2 damage or more. And then once depleted, that weapon will be discarded. So we're going to go ahead and add this to our character. Now, one other important thing to keep in mind is that a character does have limitations on the equipment that it can carry and the different things it can have equipped. So each crew member can hold a 1 or 2 one-handed weapons or 1 two-handed weapon. So with the rifle, she must choose to hold the rifle and everything else will be put off to the side. So pistols can be stored in holsters at her side. She can have 1 weapon on her back, and she can hold up to 3 items in her different pockets. After that, then you must either give it to an adjacent crew member, or you must choose to discard an item if you are trying to pick up something new and you're full. One other part of movement that I'd like to cover real quick is how stealth works. This is a very important part of the game and really adds another layer to it. So first off, in order for a character to enter stealth, they must perform a stealth check by rolling the number of dice on their stealth ability and rolling at least 1 5 or better. Once they do that, then they can move into a room, and they can do this before they enter a room. They must stay along the wall edges or in obstructing terrain. As long as they do that, they will remain in stealth, but if they move out of those spaces, then their stealth will be over. They will also end stealth if they perform an attack action. Now, an enemy that is in a room and adjacent to a character that is in stealth can perform a scan check, and if they're successful, then they can perform an attack against that character. Now, other characters must also perform scans in order to target that character as usual. And the one other important thing with this is that a crew member must roll a stealth test before each movement. So each turn that a character is in stealth, they must continue to be in stealth by rolling in a successful stealth check. So let's take a look at an example of this real quick. So we're going to say that our weapons specialist over here is going to try to perform a stealth check so she can get past the Iron Dragon here. So her stealth skill is very good. At 5 dice, she's going to get to roll, and she's looking for at least 1 5. She does roll that, so she is in stealth, and her movement value is a 4, so she gets to move up to 4 spaces, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Now again, at the beginning of her next turn, she must roll a successful stealth check again to remain in stealth. Now, if an enemy is in the cave, and they can be adjacent to her, they will perform a scan check. And any NPC character will always try to move next to a stealth character to scan them. Another action that players can perform is boarding an enemy ship. As long as the ship is still docked at the planet and the player has range to it, they can perform an action that will allow them to board the enemy ship. And the last action our players have the option of performing are any special abilities that require an action on their cards. For example, if we look at Dro Tove, he has an ability that is called Empath, which allows him to perform a 5+ search scan test within 3 spaces of an opposing character to force them to move half of their speed value in any direction of your choice. If he succeeds in this, then it counts as an action. And other characters will have different abilities or different things that will require them to spend an action to do that. There are also a number of free actions that players can also choose for their characters to do, which are to exchange gear and items with other crew members they're adjacent to. You can swap weapons at the beginning of the crew member's turn only. Scan a room for hidden enemies, or scan an adjacent container to find out what's in it. You can also perform an elude test, perform a stealth test, and the final thing is to ascend with your ship, which you can do at any point in time during your planetary phase, and that will allow your ship to leave the planet's surface and return to orbit. Again, once both players have completed their planetary turn, they will move to the NPCs, which will be activated in the order the players choose. Each NPC is going to work a little bit differently. For villains, they're going to go towards the character that has the highest initiative, and if tied, then they'll roll off to determine who is going to be the target this turn. With soldiers and warriors, they're going to move towards their closest targets that they have range to perform attacks against them. And creatures are going to follow the same suit as warriors and soldiers. Especially if they're guarding areas, they'll move towards members that are trying to move around stealthily, and they will get to perform free scan checks in order to detect them. Once you've completed doing all of your actions with all the NPC characters, then we're ready to move into the final phase of the round. So after we've resolved all of our characters' movement and any NPC characters that we need to move, then we're ready to move into the final phase, which is the world event phase. During this phase, we're going to draw the top card of the world event deck and resolve its effects. If this is the final card drawn, then our players will have one final turn where they'll get to do an orbital and planetary phase, and then the game will be over and they'll resolve the effects of the game. So let's go and draw the top card of the world event deck and see what we have. So we found Quake. This is a planet surface effect. And what is that rumbling? Perform a 5 attack. Each character not on the center tile defends against that attack, and each hit does 1 damage. Each damage taken pushes the character back 1 space from the center square. Flyers are unaffected by this, and wall damage applies. So let's go ahead and resolve the effects of this. First off, we'll see what the Quake does. So we're going to roll 5 attack dice. And we do 2 hits. So each of our characters is going to resolve 2 hits because none of our characters are on that center tile. So we'll go ahead and start over here with the coalition players. We have the captain first, so he's going to roll his 2 dice. And then his defense allows him to increase 1 dice by 1 value. So he's going to stop 1 damage. And he'll take 1, and then he would get pushed back 1 space, but since we have characters behind him, they're going to basically support him, and so he won't be pushed back. So we're going to move over next to our droid, and he fails both, and his defense is 0, so he will take 2 damage, and again, he has a guy behind him, so he is supported, so we'll move over to our next guy. Rolls 1 success, and he can increase 1 other dice, 1 point, but it's not going to matter. He'll take 1 damage. And moving over to our other guys over here. So we have our captain. She's going to get her roll. She rolls a 6 and a 2. Again, she can increase 1 dice, 1 point, but it's not going to matter, so she'll take 1. And she can't be pushed back any further because she is against the side wall. So then we'll go to our next person. She rolls double 1, so she can increase 2 dice, up to 2 dice, 1 point, or 1 dice, 2 points, but either way, it's not going to matter. So she'll take 2 hits, and again, she's against the wall, so we'll move over to our final person, a 5 and a 1. So we could increase the 5 to a 6, but it's not going to matter. You're going to stop at least 1 damage, so she'll take 1. And again, her defense is +1 to either 2 different dice or +1 to 1 dice twice. All right, so we resolved the effects of that, and so at this point, then, we would start up a new round since our world event deck still has cards in it. And this will continue going around until either the players have reached the point where they have decided to stop the game. One of the players has completed the objectives, and they can also choose at that point to board their ship and fly back to their planet, which could be the end game condition as well, or you run out of world event cards. Well, I hope you guys found that video helpful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you enjoy these videos, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it will help me to continue to grow and bring new and exciting games to you guys. And as always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my videos and to leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it, and I do take into account everything that you guys have to say. I want to continue to make these videos and make them better and better every time. I want to continue to grow. So if you guys have any other comments or questions, you can also swing over to my Facebook and Twitter accounts. Let me know what you guys are doing, what your games you guys are playing, what other games you guys might be interested in me covering. I'm only one person, so if there's stuff that you guys think that I should be covering or looking at, let me know. or there's just stuff that you guys would be interested in me covering. I'm always interested to see what you guys are playing. Love to start conversations with you guys to see how things are going in different areas or what games are hot that I may have missed or haven't heard of yet. So let me know, leave those comments, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.